Hi there! Welcome back to another video on my channel. I wanted to make a video about this because I made videos on NaNoWriMo previously on this channel that are a little bit old, and I just wanted to address the latest things, I guess, being said by NaNoWriMo and how it relates to this channel and my thoughts on it and like what I'm doing about NaNoWriMo moving forward. I wanted to make this video a couple weeks ago, but then I saw D'Angelo Wallace make a video and I was like, dang. So I'm going to be linking his video in the description of this. I watch a lot of D'Angelo and I'm going to be referencing that video quite a bit for this video. So I just want to give credit where credit is due, and I'll put his video down here. And so yeah, it took me a minute, but I kind of gathered my thoughts and I tried to figure out what I wanted to add on to this conversation that wasn't already being said by his video. So I took some time to do that, and then that's how I put together this sort of video, what we're going to be talking about today. So if you're interested in NaNoWriMo, AI, and all that jazz as it pertains to writing, just keep on watching. If you are new to this channel, hi, welcome. My name is Cassidy, and I am an author. This is my channel. I talk about writing and author stuff, in addition to content about my hobbies and things like that. So I just wanted to let people know what NaNoWriMo is in case you've never heard of it before, and this is like your first instance of hearing about it. NaNoWriMo used to be this organization that had been around since the late 90s, I believe, and it was an organization with the intent to encourage authors to write, or people who are interested in writing to actually put pen to paper and start writing. They were known for this challenge that happens every November. Every November, they would encourage people to try to write 50,000 words or a complete novel, hence the name. NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. So they had a website, and I previously participated in this challenge. Did I ever win it? No. But the whole thing about like winning NaNoWriMo is whether or not you could complete a 50,000 word manuscript within the span of a month. They had the certain things to keep, like, help you track your progress. You could see it on a linear graph or a chart or whatever. They also operated on a sticker system, so you would get stickers for certain achievements. If you know me, I am solely motivated by stickers and like tiny awards and like little milestones like that. So that was huge for me. Plus, I have like, I'm like heavy in a collector's mechanic. Like, if you know me, like my favorite sort of games involve some sort of collecting mechanic. So that tickled my brain in all the right places at the time. So I did NaNoWriMo quite a bit. Never won, because I am not somebody who can write like that. I tend to be a slow writer, plus divulging personal information. I have a mood disorder, so sometimes it's like not the most stable thing. Like, I can't constantly be in the same elevated mood for like writing and like getting things done, or like getting things done and producing like quality work at the end of the day. So that sort of challenge was never conductive to me, but I liked the spirit of community it brought. I like seeing other people do their progress. Sometimes was it a little toxic, sometimes, yeah, because I got like internally pretty competitive with people. Just being honest. And so it wasn't always best for my mental health during that. So I have a video on this channel that was like talking about the pros and cons of NaNoWriMo and like why I was doing it still. So if you see that video, just know that that is from quite a few years ago, and I don't participate in NaNoWriMo anymore. So why don't I participate in NaNoWriMo? Prior to these AI statements coming out, NaNoWriMo got in some hot water because there were grooming allegations around the company where people were using the forums to talk to minors in inappropriate ways. That wasn't really handled very well, like in terms of an internal investigation. Basically, they said that like them being this sort of like nonprofit organization, they didn't have the bandwidth for their popularity, and they couldn't monitor exactly what's going on. But then they also made a statement that like that wasn't happening in their forums despite what users were saying. So yeah, I thought it best at the time when that came out that I was just going to distance myself from that, because I don't know, it was getting a little messy. As a result of that, they kind of shut down that forum aspect to their website. So again, that element of community building kind of dissipated after that. Yeah, so that was NaNoWriMo previously, up until a few weeks ago. Maybe more like a month ago. Again, I always come at you guys with the cold tea. I'm so sorry. But so yeah. Uh, so a couple months ago, NaNoWriMo put out some statements regarding the use of AI as it pertains to their writing challenges. Again, if you don't know, there are certain programs like ChatGPT or other generative AI programs that can, like, if you put in a prompt and say, write me a book about dragons from the Middle East, and it will. And it will spread out that kind of stuff. Okay. So basically, made a statement. Their statement was talking about how they don't necessarily discriminate with different styles of writing or ways people write, including the use of AI or generative AI. Now, um, it seems kind of like a contrary concept for a organization that prides itself on being like, how many words can you write in a given amount of time? Like, that's the whole point of the challenge. It seems kind of funny for them to be like, how many words can you write in a challenge? But you can also use this computer software that can generate 50,000 words for you in a given setting. So, yeah, anyways. So, other than it just being silly in concept, people are also kind of upset by that because, again, if you don't know, generative AI tends to, in order for it to function, it has a database, right, of works that it can pull from to help fill in gaps for your prompts. A lot of the times, the works that are in its database aren't there based on like consent. They kind of like scrape the internet for data for these things, and so they'll take popular works or just works online in general, and just like feed that into a computer, and then the computer creates some sort of Frankenstein project based on your prompt. So that's kind of what generative AI is. It's like trying to creatively come up with something by taking existing ideas and repurposing them for whatever prompt is there. Okay. I'm going to try to stay neutral as I'm describing this to you because I feel like this is a very polarizing issue. And I definitely have like my personal opinions on it that I'll get into in a minute. But I just want, in terms of the description, I just want to make this a little bit more technical for you guys and understand the nuances of like why people feel the way they do about these sorts of things. Okay, so that's what generative AI is. There are other forms of AI that exist that can be tools to help writers. There's like speech to text devices that can help for writers who may not be able to type anymore. Some people use AI editing services to go over their stuff and make edits for them. I mean, I have on Google Docs grammar suggestions and spell check, right? So that's already ingrained kind of in the writing process in a way. But the people aren't necessarily referring to that when they're talking about like criticizing AI. It's more of the generative AI when it comes up with coming up with like original content, right? So yeah, that's what's being discussed here. Well, so I already mentioned kind of being contradictory to the whole point of what NaNoWriMo is. Further context for this, so they recently got a sponsor prior to this statement coming out, and the sponsor itself was for a service that deals with not only editing AI services but generative AI services. So again, being recently sponsored by that, putting out that article, okay, we see what's going on here, right? So some of the users who participate in NaNoWriMo were very critical of this because of the sketchy sponsorship, but then critical of also the statement being pointed out and the statement being put out, and then people reacted to it. They put out some statement that was kind of like knee-jerk reaction-y, kind of, that was just kind of like, oh, I can't believe NaNoWriMo supports blank, and it was a little clapbacky, which is weird. It's weird to see like organizations, or not necessarily corporations, but like stuff like that, having their clapback eras. It's really weird to me to see that. But anyway, so they put out a statement like that. It rubbed people the wrong way. But then after that, I put out another statement that was talking about why people would want to use generative AI in their work. And this is the part that people got really, really upset by. Um, yeah, so they basically made the argument that there's some instances like with indie authors, and I just want to restate that I myself am an independent author. I publish myself on Amazon and things like that. Okay, so for independent authors that don't have the financial backing or publishing resources, that like they have to use generative AI because they can't afford people to edit their shit for them, or they can't afford to pay people to edit or do whatever. So that was their initial argument. Then it talked about how people who are indie tend to also be people who come from marginalized communities, dependent on like race, background, disability, identity, demographic, stuff like that. So they're like, oh yeah, well, these people don't get picked up very often, and therefore are poor, and therefore have to use generative AI because they can't afford XYZ. Okay. And then that soon divulged into talking about disability specifically. And they were talking about how some people just don't have the cognitive functions or the brain capacity to recognize problems within their own writing. And therefore, they need generative AI to help them, I guess, or like editing softwares to help, things like that. So, yeah. I'm just going to state for the purpose of this video that, like I mentioned earlier, I have a mood disorder, so technically that's a disability, right? And sometimes it can affect my performance or my work. I'm very like stubborn though, and I'm a kind of power through it kind of person, even though that's like not necessarily the best for me. But I must admit that there's like days where I get a lot more work done than others. And then even if there's days where I'm feeling productive, depending on the state of my mood, like again, it does not produce the best quality of work, even though I'm writing nominally like thousands of words in a day. If I go, the quality might be shit. Yeah, so that's my life. So I would fall under that category of people whose brains just don't work sometimes. Again, but it's varying degrees, right? I also fall into a disenfranchised category, just being a queer person, and some publishers don't vibe with that, and therefore I guess won't publish my stuff. I don't know, but I have immense amount of privilege as white women because I feel like the publishing industry has a shit ton of white women in it. So go figure. Anyway, from what I understood, it's just in my own circles, right? A lot of people who have disabilities or who are disabled authors kind of like took strong offense to that, as if having a disability just means that you can't write shit because you're too dumb to understand what's going on. So again, I think this was an instance of, again, a weird organization or corporation using identity politics to deflect criticism, because again, you're putting out these statements because you're sponsored by a company that you know provides services, AI services, right? So of course you're going to try to make a statement, and then when you're looking bad, some people bring up identity politics or things like that to try to cover their ass, except you are directing those criticisms at the communities that reside in that area. I don't know. I don't think people really, the statements were put out, and D'Angelo, it was really funny that he pointed out all the like grammatical errors in those statements too, and that like maybe they should have used some of the services from their sponsors if that's that quality. So yeah, it was a lot. There are truths that there are barriers to publishing that are based off of identity politics, and those are like serious issues. But to weaponize those for your own personal gain kind of sucks. Um, and there are issues when it comes to the arts, and like how that can be challenging for people with like physical disabilities or like severe disabilities. And that is something that like we should be talking about too, and like how we can better help those people. Like I said, I've already mentioned the voice to text type software that helps people do that. And there's a lot more than just that, but that's the one that comes to mind for me. So yeah, that was the whole thing. And again, I haven't really been using NaNoWriMo for a while, but this caused a lot of people to kind of like leave that platform, including some of the writers that work or serve on like higher up boards for them, that they kind of like bounced. I saw that on Threads quite a bit. Where people are leaving in mass exodus. That's where they're at right now. And then their like rationale for their statement too, they made some sort of like claim that like, oh well, we put on AI events or like Zoom events or whatever, and they always have mass interest. So yeah, we're doing well. We don't need to change whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are very heavily AI enthusiasts, who, you know, want to be on the forefront of what they see as a cutting edge technology, right? Regardless of the ethics of how it comes about. Um, and like I feel like I always sit in this weird place because my husband is a computer programmer. He's a software engineer, and he works for a company who makes products that enable these sorts of tools quite a bit. They're very, very, very popular in corporate America right now. There's that. So it's hard for me because I feel like I see things through one perspective, but then as an independent writer, my reality is kind of like different. Like I see things from both sides, I guess. Again, I am always one to be eager every time I see something that like looks like we're making progress as society, but I have the same feelings about generative AI as I do for like the NFT craze, right? I remember when NFTs were a thing, or like were just starting to be a thing. I remember being very, very critical of them just because they didn't make any sense to me personally. I have other friends who program, and I was sitting down and talking to one of my besties at the time, and he programs too. And I was like, I understand that like people are making NFTs and selling them to folks because they want like an original piece of artwork, and there's like some sort of signifier in the code that dictates that this is an original and can't be reproduced, because that is like the origin of a meme or like whatever. But it doesn't make sense to me because functionally there's nothing different than like owning that NFT and paying thousands of dollars for it than and me just like screenshotting it, clipping it, and like putting it as a background, right? Like it's different from physical media, right? Because like, you know, the Mona Lisa is in the Louvre. Like it's there, you can go pay for it, you can see it. Um you could buy and you could get prints of the Mona Lisa and put it up in your room, right? But the print isn't going to necessarily capture the same sort of thing as seeing the Mona Lisa up close, seeing the brushworks, seeing the age over time, seeing like moving around and just seeing if her eyes are following you everywhere, right? Like there's certain elements of that picture you can't of that painting that you just can't capture on a picture, and like putting it up, you know, because I know, dude, everybody's got like you can get a print of the Mona Lisa. You can get a print of like some Starry Night by Van Gogh. You can get prints of some Monet paintings and put them up, right? Or you can get replications of that. But then when you see the physical work of the painting in person, you can see the all the work that got put in, right? And the individual brush strokes. But you can't replicate that with like somebody making a piece of art that exists digitally, like purely digitally with like an NFT. So I really never understood it functionally. Like I didn't understand why people were paying all that money to own an NFT, and I think that craze kind of died down a bit because there's so many like scammy ass influencers who were hopping on the NFT thing and trying to sell NFTs, or you know, trying to encourage other people to buy them. They also like cost a lot to maintain in terms of energy usage, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end of this video. But in terms of energy usage, they were also kind of like wasteful in a sense. So I never got on the NFT craze. When Bitcoin was a thing, again, I understand Bitcoin a little bit more because the same way that Bitcoin is like a fake money itself is like fake. So that I understood a little bit like why people were trying to come up with their own currencies and like trying to add nominal value to fake currencies based on what's popular, because that's already an established system in the real world. It would just transfer to things online. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of my wedding was paid for by Bitcoin. Just in general, like my husband was playing with that at the time. It made me very nervous because again, I'm just cautious when it comes to money in general. Like I don't play the stock market very much. I'm trying to get better at that and like learn to let go of things. But I grew up in a financially unstable household. So it's hard for me to really conceptualize having extra money to play with and like gamble with essentially when it comes to stock markets and things instead of just like hoarding it. But again, that's like my own personal issues that I'm working with. But anyway, so I understood the Bitcoin craze. Douglas made some money off of it. We paid our wedding off with some of it. It was great. But then again, something similar happened where influencers and scammy people were trying to encourage people to find, like, buy certain Bitcoins, Dogecoins, or whatever. They would drive up the marketplace artificially, and then they would bail out and then watch everybody else lose money in the process. And so I think it got tainted and turned into this weird ass thing. So yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how I feel about generative AI. I think AI could be such a powerful tool, especially in the medical industry, when it comes to trying to help doctors diagnose patients, especially if patients have some sort of like rare form of disease or like really hard to find tumor. I think it could be great in helping them aid in surgeries, and there's real world wonderful implications to AI. I just don't think this is one of them, and unfortunately, this is the one that's being discussed the most and talked about and hyped up. And I think it's because of the controversy around it and the contentious nature of the world we're living in. It's important to remember, and this part I'm going to sound a little woo woo here, but please follow with me. It's not like a conspiracy theory thing. It's just, I think there's so many factors of the world that are happening simultaneously that people aren't realizing how they're affecting one another. So, if you remember, like, we recently had the writer's strike in Hollywood, right? Where all these writers were going on strike. Some actors were showing solidarity and support, and there was like a Hollywood shutdown for a little bit because these writers weren't getting paid enough. I will be the first person to tell you that as a writer, it can be very difficult to make money. I don't have a stable income. I don't have a stable monthly income. For our household and bills and everything else, we pretty much solely rely on my husband's income to live, and sometimes that can be such a like added stress for him. And I always feel some sort of way, and that's my own guilt I'm working through. But that's the reality of working in a creative profession, right? Like, because the arts aren't valued in society. And if you run your own business or try to make products to sell to folks, some months are going to be better. It's just the part of the risk of that, right? But even if you do have a stable job in the arts, like saying like you're a writer for a television program or whatever, you're devalued, you're not paying paid well enough, and people were just kind of fed up with it. So there was a writer strike, right? And people were supporting. Well, during that time, there was a lot of talk about higher execs about integrating generative AI for movies and scripts and stuff as an alternative to paying writers, I guess. Now, from what I understand, the logic behind that was, again, just to save money, but also at the time they personally felt like writers weren't really putting out anything new anyway. So it's like, if we're gonna keep rehashing these same old franchises anyway, or just like using nostalgia as an easy rate to get people to go to the movies, then we might as well just use generative AI, right? Okay. I have strong feelings about that. And I could talk about that in another video too. And it might make me sound like a hypocrite because I employ a lot of nostalgia in my writing as well, but I do it in a way that makes you look at the past in a new lens. I don't do it in a way that like just rehashes the same tropes over and over again to make you comfortable and to make you keep spending money on the same product over and over again, just in a different packaging. Anyway, yeah, there's that. Anyway, so that was happening, and I think that's important to remember in all this. So that kind of trickled. So that's where this started, I think, with like generative AI being used as a substitute for these writer strikes happening in Hollywood, and it make business sense. That kind of trickled into companies figured out that they could use generative AI to help you in their writing products, right? For emails, promotional products, advertisements, things like that. You can incorporate AI and you could just do that. And so again, more writers are getting laid off from corporate positions or things that would have been seen as stable income, right? Because you see these corporations being like, hey, we can save a quick buck, we can use the software, just double check it before you post, and bam, bing bang boom, you're good, right? And then now it's becoming a thing where people are trying to justify the use of generative AI in their own creative projects, but then when that criticism is met, it's getting like there's like a knee-jerk reaction to it, right? And I think there's a confusion between barriers to entry and like practicing skill and craft as a whole. Back when there was a society that cared about the arts, and it was a flex to have like these giant portraits in your home, or to have beautiful pieces of art throughout the city, or to have architecture that said something, right? Um, People would have trained their whole lives as apprentices under masters and pick up techniques and skills and then develop their own thing. Like that was their job. That's how they lived. And they had patrons, which were rich people, right? Who would basically fund their lifestyle as long as they kept getting this beautiful art from these people, right? We don't live in that kind of society anymore if it's not blatantly obvious. That system's not in place at all. And um, I think, and I understand, because this is a similar argument to being like, well, there's really no financial gain to go to college anymore because you're just going to end up with debt and you're not going to find a job that can sustain your lifestyle, right? I've heard that argument from folks. And even though I do value education, that's really, really important, it's hard for me to ignore someone's economic reality and like be like, and try to explain to them why education is still important, right? In a way that is tangible for them to understand, because we undervalue education as a whole in the society. Okay, great. It's the same thing with the arts, where there is people are perceiving this as a career path that's non-viable because there's no way to make a living at it anymore. And so instead of people wanting to take the time to hone the craft, train a skill, maybe they're tempted by generative AI where they can do the same sort of thing and just put shit out there and then still feel like they're committing to the arts or whatever, right? The problem is that, again, the software relies on the work that's already done by people who are willing to put in the skill and time for the craft themselves. So you're kind of piggybacking off the skills that these people learned. And I would just want to say that in spite of the fact that it's really hard for people to make a living at art, there's people who still make art in spite of all that because they love it, because they can't see themselves doing anything else, or maybe they have a day job and this is the one thing that they do to preoccupy their time outside of work, right? For me personally, like even though writing is hard, the whole point of it is I like to write. I've been writing since I was a kid. Like, yeah, I've published poetry as a cringy middle schooler, and it's bad, and you can find it online. But I published cringy poems as like a preteen, and even earlier than that, I've been writing for so long because I love it, and there are people who are willing to do it for free because they love it, but they shouldn't just do it for free because we should value arts as society. It's like it's not. This is a top down problem. It's not individual people, and I think that's the part that people are missing, is that like generative AI is being peddled to you as okay, sorry, I got a phone call. This is a top down problem where these corporations are funneling this idea to you about generative AI, and people are eating it up and be like, yes, this is my thing now, instead of it being a bottom up approach to art, if that makes sense. Because people who are on the bottom, who are putting in this as their livelihood, or who are taking the time to do this to hone their talents and skills and whatever, they and techniques, from what I understand, they're the ones that are being most affected by it, not the people at the top. Like, there is no societal change. And the problem with that too is like art is always meant to reflect society and critique society. Even back then when the patrons were funding these artists' lifestyles, a lot of them still put in social critiques to their art. And I just have this weird sinking feeling about how with generative AI, if people become too reliant on it to create their art, that element's going to be missing, right? Because we already have art and books that exist that aren't really critiquing anything anymore. And they're bending to the wills of the market and the businesses and all that. Like, writing and art is supposed to be punk and sort of rebellious, or at least tell the truth about people's lived experiences through a very snapshot lens in society. And I feel like that element is already missing because of how businessy art has become. And to add generative AI to that, for me, only emphasizes that problem even more. Because is a robot really going to put out the same sort of social critique and nuance and an emotion from a genuine lived experience than the person who's in the gritty living it? You know what I mean? So this is a problem that's been happening for a while when it comes to art and writing, in the capitalism corporatification of art. But with this generative AI stuff, for me, it just feels like another nail in the coffin of that. And again, I think the people who are advocating for it, like individual people who aren't corporations advocating for it, doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think we've grown up in this age where, especially young people, um, they don't. And I'm going to sound super old when I say this, and God, I'm going to sound like my parents, my grandparents. But like some good things take time, and that's okay. Like, I remember I've been working since I was 16, right? I've been working in really shitty jobs in retail and um and just doing everything you can imagine. I worked my way through college. I worked my way through grad school, and I had a different lived experience than a lot of my peers at the time who didn't need to do that. But I also found that it gave me a lot more appreciation for the stuff I did have than the people who just were there because they had the resources to be there, you know. And it's not just an appreciation, but it's lived experience. It's perception. It's a level of maturity. It's like I don't know. I feel like we're so driven by instant gratification, and social media and everything else is making that kind of worse. And so when it comes to like making art, people aren't seeing that as a valuable element of the experience of making art. You know, they feel like you can cut that out, and it's become a very scammy business like mentality to make these sort of AI projects or AI art or whatever. It feels like the wannabe business bros that had the same energy for NFTs and stuff infiltrating the art space. Another element to talk about this, I think that's important, is also, and this could be a video all in itself, about how AI and ChatGPT and that kind of stuff is adding to the need for data centers and the sort of global emissions that are coming from that and that's kind of issue. I only bring up the climate stuff because, you know, unfortunately, like there was that horrible hurricane that just went through Florida and the Appalachian Mountains recently, and like people are, oh my god, suffering in droves, and it's crazy that something like that could happen in that region. So I just want to remind people the necessity, like the drive for us being more reflective on like our energy usage and emissions as a whole. I have this like article from the World Economic Forum about AI and like energy. I'm just using this to show this statistic. So I'm just going to read this to you guys real quick. Microsoft, which has invested in ChatGPT maker OpenAI, has positioned generative AI tools at the heart of its product offering. Recently announced its CO2 emissions had risen nearly 30% since 2022 due to data center expansion. Google's GHG emissions in 2023 were almost 50% higher than the 2019, largely due to the energy demand tied to data centers. And again, AI's energy use currently only represents a fraction of the technology center's power consumption, which is estimated to be about 2 to 3% of global emissions. Okay. It's more about like how ChatGPT functions, because you have this AI model, it's like always on, you can't really turn it off, and so they'll have like data stored in there that's like used once and then not really used again. So I can go and I can do another video in depth about like emissions. I just also say this too because so like obviously we should be watching our CO2 emissions when it comes to like global warming and things like that, but Microsoft as a deterrent to try to reduce their carbon emissions has been switching over to nuclear power. And something I saw a few days ago that I thought was interesting was talking about how, I don't know if you guys know about 3 Mile Island, but it was a power plant in Pennsylvania that back in the 70s had a accident happen, and it really devastated the area. And so that power plant has been closed since, hang on, yeah, this power plant got shut down in 2019, but then now it's being reopened because Bill Gates bought it out. And they're going to be using that power plant specifically for data centers for Microsoft. So then, yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. Obviously, that kind of like invokes an emotional response because there was such a tragic accident at this power site, and obviously they don't use that faulty machinery anymore. But they are opening it back up just to power Microsoft data centers. So again, I'm not trying to be like a doomsayer or whatever, but like this is something that's like really important to me about mindful data usage or mindful technological advancements as it relates to the environment. And I feel like it just disappoints me because people talk a lot about the generative AI stuff and like whether or not something is really creating original artwork, but then these sorts of things that like have real world impacts beyond just economics and the morals, I guess, don't get talked about enough. So I wanted to add that little tidbit at the end of this video and just remind you guys that like how we interact online and it does have like world impact, not even just socially, but like environmentally. And I don't really have an answer to that, but it's just an issue that I thought you guys should be aware of. And it's also just disappointing that this hurricane hasn't really been talked about at all by the presidential candidates this year, or there hasn't been a lot, like, I haven't heard a lot about like humanitarian aid yet in regards to what's going on. And I don't know, it's just disappointing to see, me personally, that like all of our money as a country in the US is going to be funded for wars overseas and stuff where people are bombing each other in ridiculous amounts, and again damaging, not just killing people's lives, but also damaging the environment. And then we're seeing all this play out, and then it's just substantially worse, and I'm spiraling. But anyway, so I wanted that to be made aware of you. I just want to add that little tidbit to the conversation. If you guys are interested in that last point, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll make another video talking about environmental concerns when it comes to ChatGPT and stuff like that. But that's just all my opinions on this whole thing. So even just beyond NaNoWriMo, like what is the role of generative AI in the future? What's the role of AI in general? Because again, like I said, there's plenty of instances where AI can be a wonderful thing for society. I don't want it to just sound like I'm against AI because I don't want to be out of a job. But there are real world consequences to generative AI too, and not just like within the arts or within business, but for the planet as well. So yeah, anyway, this is my long-winded little ramble about NaNoWriMo AI and writing. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please leave a like, comment down below, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. Please, please, please. It would help me out a lot. And until next time, thanks. Bye.